Imagine for a minute that you are a data scientist working in artificial intelligence. Your friends and family often criticize your work. They say it's gonna kill us all, and they urge you to stop working in this field. You need a break. So instead of day drinking, you and your gal pals get dressed up in pink to go watch Oppenheimer. You see some similarities between the questions the scientists in the movie asked and what your friends and family say about your work. And you think, what if AI actually is the next atomic bomb? Am I become death, the destroyer of worlds? Yo, maybe AI really does need some regulation. Well, lucky for you, this video is about the fascinating topic of government regulation. Wait, don't click away. You've watched enough of this video that you are now invested. You and I are stuck in this until the end, because we have to figure out how to keep AI from killing us all. Approved just last month, this was the first AI regulation passed by any major regulator. No. I'm not a lawyer, I am a data scientist, so, please let me know what you think, but here's what it says. The EU decided to place all AI tools and, applications, apps, into 3 risk categories. There's applications considered by the EU to be an unacceptable risk. Those are going to be banned. And then there's the high risk category, which are just going to be subject to additional government regulation and oversight. And then everything else that is not either unacceptable risk or high risk is not going to be regulated by the EU. So an example of an unacceptable risk, according to this EU legislation, would be something similar to China's government-run social scoring algorithm. That means all EU members are banned from using something similar to that, so it appears that that particular episode of Black Mirror will not become a reality, at least in the European Union. Here's an algorithm that would be considered a high risk in the EU, the ATS algorithm. For those unfamiliar with what it is, the ATS algorithm scans resumes and job applications, CVs, whatever they're called in your country, and then ranks the applicants according to a machine learning algorithm. So in the European Union, this algorithm would be subject to additional government regulation. I wish we had that in the United States. At face value, this law sounds, to be honest, downright intuitive or commonsensical. But the thing is, I think that it's probably going to be hard to enforce. Let me tell you what I mean. There's multiple reasons. For example, we're going to have to wait and see what they do with other potentially harmful algorithms that can be used for non-harmful reasons, like those that capture and store data about faces for law enforcement or marketing purposes. That same algorithm could be used to look at a scan and diagnose cancer in somebody. That particular algorithm, it would be some sort of a convolutional neural network. Should we ban it? Let me know what you think. This EU Act, which was literally just approved, will be regulated by the brand new European Union Artificial Intelligence Office. Each member state now has 12 months to nominate one national authority each. If you want to read more about the EU law, I will link it in the description. So while the EU was the first to pass legislation, they weren't the first to put pen to paper. That legacy actually belongs to this crusty old prehistoric life form. I kid. Spoiler alert though. It's actually surprisingly good for something drafted by a bunch of old people that have to call their grandkids every time they want to use the Facebook. This executive order stipulates that AI developers have to notify the federal government anytime they're training an algorithm that could be potentially classified as a risk to national security, according to the Defense Production Act. We will come back to that later. I promise. After telling the government about this model training, they're also required to report their safety results. It's extremely vague about what specific safety requirements are. The executive order actually places the responsibility of figuring that out onto the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which is a division of the Department of Commerce. It also tasks Homeland Security with coming up with an AI safety and security board. You'll never guess who they put on the AI safety and security board. Go ahead, try to guess. If you guessed the CEOs of the AI companies developing all this stuff, congratulations, you got it right. I mean, there are other members on it too. Here's a list, okay? All right, so let's come back to that thing that I said we would come back to just a few minutes ago. The Defense Production Act was signed in 1950 by President Harry S. Truman. It's kind of long. There's a bunch of parts, but the concerning section is actually Title I. It says that the president is allowed to declare certain things, in this case, AI weapons, to be critical to national security, and then force businesses to make them. Are we comfortable with the United States government or whoever's in charge of it forcing businesses to produce products in the artificial intelligence field? See, I feel like they get pretty loose with that definition of national security ever since 9/11. And I, for one, would rather go to jail than let the government force me to make an AI weapon. If I disappear someday, you'll know why. Okay, so there's a lot more in the EO, and like I said, a lot of it is actually really good. I'll link it in the description if you want to read it. But the thing in the EO that, I mean, there's a few things, but the one thing that I think is actually pretty damn forward-looking is that they tasked the Department of Commerce with developing guidance about the authentication and watermarking of AI content. They claim that it's to protect people from AI scams and identity theft, as well as, deep fake political propaganda and whatnot. And yeah, it could do that. I'm kind of doubtful that they can do much in that realm. But I do think it's an excellent idea to watermark all this stuff for a different reason that isn't actually discussed in the EO. These large language models are trained on existing data. We don't want them to train on data that another AI built. That would be bad. That reinforces and proliferates mistakes that an AI could have made. So in that case, it is a good idea to watermark all of the AI generated stuff so that a next generation of a large language model or neural network does not train on that AI generated stuff. I don't know what you're thinking right now, but if you're like me, you're probably sitting there thinking that bureaucrats and billionaires probably aren't the answer as to who should regulate AI. They're not who I would consider qualified in the skill sets of both understanding artificial intelligence and understanding sociology and humanity. We as a society do this stupid thing where we always select people from one of those two groups. Either a bureaucrat or a billionaire always gets in charge of everything. We need to wake up to the fact that this is way too important to let either of those two groups of people regulate this stuff. When I was sitting in Oppenheimer, I realized what we should probably be doing. The International Atomic Energy Agency, or the IAEA, was created in 1957 as part of this dude's Arms for Peace address given to the General Assembly of the United States in 1953. Yes, I did deliberately choose a picture of President Dwight D. Eisenhower when he was a general. Generals aren't always warmongers. He recognized that, in this case, what the world was innovating was a potentially civilization-ending device if it was used for the wrong reasons. Upon signing the IAEA into existence, President Eisenhower famously said this: Anyway, it was when I was sitting in Oppenheimer with my gal pals that I realized we just need to treat AI like it's nuclear energy. The AI promotes the peaceful use of nuclear energy by encouraging the exchange of scientific and technical information between member states. And they have a regulatory framework where they go and inspect nuclear power facilities for safety. And in fact, you would hear from nuclear power operators, like for example, Tyler Fultz on his YouTube channel. He says a lot of times the IAEA inspections are actually scarier and more rigorous than inspections by the local governing body. Almost every country in the world is actually a member of the IAEA, and the only non-member countries are Suriname, Guinea-Bissau, Equatorial Guinea, Sao Tome and Principe, South Sudan, Somalia, Maldives, Andorra, Bhutan, North Korea, that one is yellow because it dropped out, it used to be a member state, Micronesia, Timor-Leste, Tuvalu, Kiribati, Nauru, and the Solomon Islands. We don't have to worry about most of those countries because they're tiny. The only real wild card is North Korea. We need something like the IAEA for artificial intelligence. For example, here is Article 2 of the IAEA statute. Okay, let's just change one thing and add some stuff that's already in the US executive order about protecting privacy and other, important stuff. We now have an awesome framework that we could apply to artificial intelligence. It's not rocket science. Well, technically, I guess it could be. We could get this drawn up and sent to a bunch of the IAEA member states for signature very quickly. So why are we not doing it? In my opinion, these AI companies are working to safeguard their algorithms and try to protect what they see as their intellectual property. They want their competitors to not have access to the weights and biases that they use to train their neural networks. People talk about them all the time, but they misunderstand what they are. A black box algorithm is